Kia ora koutou, ko Madeleine Armstrong Wilcox toku ingoa. My name is Madeleine Armstrong Wilcox. Thank you for spending some time with me today to talk about some things that work for our gifted and neurodiverse kiddos. I am the head of programs here at the Neurodiversity in Education project. I just want to tell you about that a little. We are just in the middle of renaming ourselves from the New Zealand Centre for Gifted Education to our new name, the Neurodiversity in Education project. And our new name reflects the work that we're wanting to do to bring that idea of neurodiversity, that all brains are differently wired, to the forefront with our schools. So we're not just having an exclusive focus on giftedness anymore as an organisation, but a much broader focus on the idea of brain-based differences. It's a really exciting time for us. Let me just tell you a little about the kind of things we're doing as the Neurodiversity in Education project. We have, of course, Mind Plus. That's our specialist program for gifted kids. I'm going to tell you more about that later. We have our Building a Neuroinclusive School program, which is our program where we work with teachers and schools to support their learning so that they can bring about change in their own schools. And we are also part of the Neurodiversity in Education Coalition. So that's us with ADHD New Zealand, Autism New Zealand, and the Dyslexia Foundation of New Zealand. And that's where we come together to advocate for the needs of our learners in schools, in homes, in the workplace. That's that bigger picture. So back to this, things that work. I just want to tell you about my role as the head of programs because it's a really interesting one. I come to my role with two hats on, with the teacher hat. So first of all, I have had this lifelong fascination with how children think and learn. I'm particularly interested in looking at those differences between how children think and learn. Some children just seem to think so quickly or so deeply and slowly. Some have incredible creativity. Some have incredible questions. And oh my goodness, they ask all of the questions all of the time. I am, as a teacher, just transfixed by trying to understand how those beautiful brains work. So, as a teacher myself, I'm interested in that. As a young teacher, I decided I needed to know a whole lot more about those beautiful brains. So I went off and I did 2 master's degrees trying to figure out how these beautiful brains work. It's not enough, apparently. I'm still absolutely fascinated in this, what is happening in our children's brains. The second thing that I bring to the role is my actual life as a parent. I am parent to 2 beautiful teenagers. Well, one's just turned 21, so not a teenager anymore. 2 beautiful kiddos who are neurodivergent. They are both gifted and have an additional form of neurodiversity. So as a teacher, I'm interested in those brains, and as a parent, I have been nurturing those beautiful and differently wired brains. It's been quite a ride. So today I thought I would talk you through some of the biggest and most important ideas behind everything that we do with students at Mind Plus and with teachers when we're supporting them through our Neuroinclusive Schools project. These 3 big ideas sit behind absolutely everything we do. So I thought I would bring them to the surface for you and see how they resonate with you. So the first and most important is this idea that different is the norm and different is okay. We need to be really clear that our gifted kids and kids who have other forms of neurodivergent are different from regular kids. Their brains are simply wired in different ways. They know in themselves, without anyone telling them as well, that they have something different about them. For many of our gifted and neurodivergent kids, if they are growing up without the affirmation that different is okay, different is the norm, it's all fine. If they grow up without that, they internalize that sense of difference and they start to think that different is wrong. There is somehow something wrong with their brains or wrong with them or broken. Those are some pretty negative internal messages to live with. And I think it is incredibly important that as parents and teachers, we are very, very clear that people's brains are wired differently. That is the norm. And that is completely and absolutely okay. Let me just show you one really easy strategy we can use as parents and teachers to reinforce that message, because we all know as parents, when we say things, kids can just go, oh, that's that mum nagging again. And that's okay. We need to keep up that positive nagging. Different is the norm and different is okay. But there are some amazing picture books out there now that have characters who are quirky and different, and they really can help us to get across this idea that different is okay and different is the norm. Here's just a really small selection. So some books are simple stories that have kids who are different in them. And some books are more kind of instructional books where they teach us about difference. Both are needed, but I do think it's really important that there are lots of simple stories where you're not trying to deliberately teach a lesson. So in the Mind Plus world, we call them stories, not sermons. So it's really important that sometimes we just have simple stories, but also that we can use books as deliberate teaching tools. So different is the norm and different is okay. First idea. Second idea is we put strengths first. As parents and teachers, it's really easy for us to notice the problems, the difficulties, the weaknesses, that, oh, this isn't going right, and work really hard to fix those things, which is all fine. But let's flip it a little and put strengths at the forefront. I just want to dig into what we mean by strengths. So there's the really obvious ones, the academics, good at reading, good at writing, good at maths, good at whatever. All of those things are the easy end of strengths. They're easy to notice. They're easy to develop. We can really easily measure and quantify those things. It's the easy end. We can support those strengths without any problems at all. But we do need to go deeper than that when we're thinking about strengths and what matters for kids. What matters for kids often isn't, I'm good at reading, I'm good at maths. It's often something a little bit different. So when we dig a bit deeper, we can also find what teachers in schools usually call the extracurricular strengths. So things that are just a little bit on the fringe of schooling or outside school altogether. So strengths in, say, chess club or dance or music or cultural groups. Things like that that are just either completely outside of school or just, one lesson a week at school, we do a bit of dancing or what have you. Those can be really important strength areas. They can tell us a lot about what a child is interested in and passionate about and good at. So that's another place we need to be alert to strengths. But where the real magic happens is when we think about the underlying abilities and qualities that enable strengths to actually happen. So let me just tell you a little bit about a girl I used to teach at Mind Plus, and she was a nationally ranked chess player who would go to international tournaments and rank really highly in international tournaments. Phenomenal young chess player. Obviously at Mind Plus, I can't teach you chess. She has her own chess tutor outside of her experience of schooling, which is just as it should be. I'm not going to be teaching her. anything related to chess. But clearly, that was a strength area of hers. So what we did is looked at what are the underlying abilities, what are the things happening in her brain that enable that high level of chess. Right? When we kind of really dug around in it, here are some of the things that we found out. We worked out that chess is about recognizing and predicting those really complex patterns. We worked out that there's a lot of planning ahead. So she could map out in her head options, pictures, the board, the pieces, the responses. She could envision that completely. So that planning ahead, and that not just I'm going to turn right at the next traffic lights type of planning ahead, but really complex, multi-layered planning ahead. An awful lot of memory skill involved in all of this. So her skills and abilities and memorization and pulling those memories up and out and using them was a really strong underlying ability. When this particular girl talked about chess, she also said, well, chess is actually about forcing someone to do what you want them to do on the chessboard. So we talked about that's about persuading or manipulating or forcing, whatever word you want to put around it. That's how she described it. You have to force the other player to do what you want them to do. So these are some pretty cool underlying abilities that enable chess that we can then, strategically work on at My Plus. We can work on recognizing patterns and planning ahead and doing some of those things that will build those strengths. Can't do chess, but can do some of these things. We also looked at the qualities because we have to remember that our gifted kids, any kids, but gifted kids in particular, aren't just brains on sticks. They are whole people that have rich emotional and social lives. They have those personal qualities that matter as well. So when we think about our gifted kids in particular, we do need to think about abilities and qualities as kind of partners there. So we worked out with her what were some of the qualities that she held that enabled that great chess playing. And she worked out things like bravery, being okay to interact with all sorts of people was a really big one for her because chess club, she would play people who were younger than her, older than her, much older than her. Her local chess club was in fact populated mostly by middle-aged and older men. And she was, a 10-year-old girl, but she would need to play against these older people. So she had good competition in her chess game. So being okay with interacting with all sorts of people was a key personal quality for her. The ability to stick with it, grit, tenacity, persistence, whatever you want to call that, super important when things got tough. And really interesting thing that this girl identified that underlied her chess ability was what she called the killer spirit, that desire to really beat someone else in a game of chess, right? That sense of competition. She identified in herself that really great chess players had huge killer spirit. They had this quality in bucket loads, and she didn't. She had a bit. Like she wanted to win a game of chess, but not passionately at all costs. Her killer spirit was kind of dialed down. I did make it clear to her that that wouldn't be something we would work on developing in class, but that was okay. So you can see how even that extracurricular strength of being great at chess has a whole set of underlying abilities and qualities that enable that strength. But those same abilities and qualities could enable a whole lot of other strengths as well. And that's why we need to think about those underlying abilities and qualities, not just how they are demonstrated right now. So let's whip back here. We've got looking at strengths at different levels. I also think it's super important that we dig into what our kids are actually interested in and passionate about, because they will become the avenues that our kids use to develop their strengths. So if your child is really interested in stingrays, that's going to be an area where they are going to be able to develop strengths. If your child is absolutely passionate about Pokemon, that's an area that they can tap into, you can tap into, that will develop those underlying strengths. You'll know as an adult that the things you are interested in and passionate about are the things that you want to do more of. And I think that's key as well, that when our kids are interested and passionate, they want to do more of it, they get more opportunities to develop more skills and more qualities. Really important. Okay, so different ways of looking at strengths, and I think it's really important for us to really dig into those underlying features, not just stay at, oh, my child's quite good at reading and maths. That's cool. Dig in further. Okay, but why should we focus on strengths? Well, there are so many reasons, and these are supported in all of the research and the theory. I'm just going to whip through them really fast. We know that when we focus on students' strengths, they are more likely to pay attention and to be engaged with what they are doing. And we know as parents and teachers that it feels like we are in a battle for kids' attention all the time. So if we can hook it using strengths, fantastic. We know that when we are working in a strength area as adults, we can develop that sense of flow, that sense of being really deeply engrossed and interested in something, and it's going really well, and we feel really satisfied and really good when we're doing it. We know that when children are building strengths and working in their strength area, they are developing their academic self-concept in a really positive and healthy way. That sense of, I know I can do this, I am doing this, hey, look at that, I did that really well. That lovely self-fulfilling loop of feeling good about your own academic abilities. We know that working in strengths areas supports students' well-being. They feel good when they're doing it, and when they feel good, they develop that healthy sense of identity, and not that sense of identity that says, I'm different, I'm wrong, I'm broken, but that sense of identity that says to them, I'm okay, I might have these different interests and these different strengths, but everything is going well, right? Really important. We know that when children work together in strength areas with other kids who are interested in those same things, that they develop that sense of belonging and connection in a group, which is really important if you are feeling a bit different and a bit unsure about being different. Being able to connect with people with like minds is really important. We know that all of that feeds into a beautiful sense of achievement and accomplishment, which is so important. Okay, so our first two big ideas: different is the norm and different is okay. Focus on strengths. Third big idea is around regulation. Let's just take a step back and explain why this is, because we know that for our gifted kids, a big part of who they are as gifted is this idea of intensity. They have intense minds. They have intense emotions. They have intense creativity. They have intense sensory experiences, and they have intense bodies. Right? They think big. They feel big. In every sense of that word, all of their inner experiences are just dialed up. So it is really important that as parents and as teachers, we help our students to regulate, not to just dial everything down, but to modulate that experience that can be really intense. All right, so what do we mean by regulation? let me just talk you through. First of all, we need to support students to regulate their busy brains. Having a busy brain can be hard work. And I just want to step back for 1 minute and tell you that our gifted brains are shown through modern neuroscience to be more connected, more active, more things are going on more often. So the neuroscience supports this idea of having a busy brain. Busy brains for our gifted kids are happy brains. They like to have things going on, have good things to think about. Boredom is almost literally toxic for our gifted kids. However, there is a point in every day, and as a parent, you're going to know that point where that busy brain is not feeling good anymore, likely around bedtime, or it's around ruminating around those ideas that are out of our control. Often our gifted kids might think about climate change, or the war in the Ukraine, or the US elections, or that thing they said that was wrong 3 years ago. Right? Those busy brains sometimes latch onto one thing and ruminate. They go over and over and over it, and it tips that balance away from good busy to unhealthy busy to exhausting busy. All right. As a parent, I know that kids with busy brains that tip over into that exhausted busy brain, that's not a fun place to be. And it really, really is important for us as parents to teach our students how to keep that brain busy, but actually in control. So this is a great book. There are so many different versions of this idea. This book is just called Quiet the Mind, and it really zones into that idea of brains are busy, that's fine, but when they get overloaded and the same thought circles around and around and around and around, it's not okay anymore. This book is called A Guide to Meditation, and I try to avoid the idea of meditation with our gifted kids because it has all sorts of other kind of connotations that you may or may not want to go into. But the idea is we can teach our kids strategies to tell that busy brain to just calm down a little, to just quiet things a little bit, to manage some of those thoughts sometimes. And that stops that busy brain from becoming an exhausted brain. So regulating busy brains is really important. The next is helping our kids to regulate those big emotions. Big emotions are a big deal for our gifted kids. We know again through neuroscience that our gifted kids are much more likely to have thoughts and emotions as incredibly tightly tied together. When they think, they emote. It's almost the same process going on. We know that our gifted kids experience a greater range of emotions at greater depth, and that they are more sensitive to emotions around them. So we need to, first of all, accept that our gifted kids just inherently have big emotions and that that's okay. But we also need to teach them to understand those emotions and not to feel out of control around those emotional experiences. Again, a great book. There are so many books that you can use that support kids to understand emotions. And when they can understand what's going on, that's when they can begin to manage them. And I just want to introduce you to this beautiful, beautiful picture that as adults, the way we respond to big emotions needs to be very strategically and specifically well regulated. And that's really hard to do as a parent. I know that for sure. When you are faced with big emotions, often it causes big emotions in you as well. But this is such a beautiful image just to remind us that we bring the calm to the storm. And when we bring the calm to the storm, it all just quiets down a little bit. It doesn't disappear or go away or negate those big emotions, because they are important, those big emotions. So we don't want to negate them, but we do want to help our kids to regulate them. So back to here. There's lots of great books just like this that help kids understand their emotions, and once they can understand, they can learn to manage. There is not one right way to manage big emotions. There are gazillions of ideas. It's really a case of working out with you and your child what helps when you are feeling really devastated by something someone said. What helps you work through that emotion? When you're feeling really angry, what helps you work through that emotion? It's a case of finding what works when it works. And the interesting thing about gifted kids is they grow and change all the time. So what works one day might not work the next day. It's a little bit frustrating. But if we set up that process really well of understanding feelings and working through what helps you with this, very powerful. Okay. Next one is about sensory regulation. Another thing we know about our gifted and other neurodivergent kids is that sensory input can be really big, really intense for them, and the way their brains process that sensory information can be a little bit different from how that happens in regular kids. Different in different ways. So for some kids, they struggle to process the auditory information. For some, they struggle to process the tactile information. For some, everything is just tied up, dialed up, sorry, really, really loud or bright. So again, it's about helping students, kids or students understand how their senses feel. Yeah. And that can be as simple as checking in with them. Is it too bright, too loud, too dark, too quiet? How are your senses finding this environment? And teaching them some strategies again to manage those environments. It can be as simple as, if you and your kids are in a really loud space and they're really struggling, leave the loud space for now, or give them headphones. These things don't have to be challenging, and they don't have to be huge actions that change everyone's lives. Sometimes the really little things that we do can make an enormous difference. All right, 3 big ideas. Different is the norm. Let's use our strengths first. I'll turn the page for you. And let's teach our kids how to regulate. These big ideas, if they inform absolutely everything you do, you're on the winning track straight away. I also want to talk you through this one strategy you can use for absolutely everything. So let's have a little look at this one strategy for everything. It's so simple. First of all, we notice what's going on. We find the strength. We acknowledge the sticking points or the difficulties, and then we respond. How do I support the strength? How do I work around the challenges? How do I develop the strengths? So let me show you this in action. Here are a few might be familiar scenarios with our gifted kids. They've lost something again, left their school bag somewhere, arrived at school and left their shoes at home, arrived at school, left their school bag at home. That's happened to me more than a few times. Late night bedtimes. We have a million questions. We have that ruminating, busy brain, and we've got to let some of those ideas out. Big emotions, big floods of tears, no real reason. Absolute terror of something that's on the TV or in a movie or whatever it is that you're watching. An absolute obsession with something quite random, and they just seem incredibly fixated on this, whatever thing this is. Another situation is kids who just have all the words all the time. If you are a quietly spoken, introverted parent and you end up with a child who is not quietly spoken and who is not introverted and who has a lot of words to say all the time, this is a challenge as a parent. So let me just pick one of these, and I want to talk you through how this one strategy for everything can work. Okay. This one is, I've picked this one because this is one of my kids who developed massive fears around things that were on TV that were slapstick style. So lots of kids' cartoons, programs, and movies. There's that real slapstick comedy, even the minions, one hits another and they all fall over and everybody laughs. Now, for my particular child, who is very emotionally sensitive, she didn't find that funny. She found it deeply, deeply upsetting. And she found it doubly upsetting because everyone else found it funny. So she was scared, upset, confused, felt unsafe about the world. And she let those feelings really be known externally, but also she held those feelings in tight. So that feeling of being unsafe and afraid and unsafe in the world, because the world, as she saw it at that point, thought that someone hurting someone else was hilarious. And that was terrifying for her. So this strategy, we think about what is the strength that we see. The strength there is emotional sensitivity. She was sensitive to other people's emotions, sensitive to her own emotions. But another strength was the sense of empathy and justice. So she could feel the pain or embarrassment of being hurt, so that she empathized with people in that situation. And she felt the sense of justice, that everything should be fair and right and okay. So those emotional aspects were her strengths. The sticking points were the ideas around being scared. All right, so we can notice the strengths, we can notice the sticking points. So how do we respond in something like that? One of the things that helped my child in that situation was expressing those emotions through any kind of creative outlet, dance, drawing, drama, anything that was creative that she could pour feelings out into really helped her manage those feelings. So that creative outlet became a really important support for her. Really easy to develop those strengths and creativity. She went to art classes. She did art as a home activity. She would come home after school, have her afternoon tea, and then draw, listen to music, paint, have a break, go to hours and hours and hours of dance classes, come home, draw, paint. Right? Those creative outlets were essential. Now, let me tell you just a little snippet about my wee girl. Emotional sensitivity, her huge strength, also had a few sticking points around it. We channeled that and built that strength through supporting her artistic endeavours. Bella's just finished a bachelor's degree in the creative arts. So those strengths have become those very significant strengths that she has developed in her life and is continuing to. So you can apply that one strategy, notice the strengths, notice the sticking points, and then respond. How do we support those strengths? How do we work around the sticking points? How do we develop those strengths? You can apply that strategy to any of these sticky situations that we have with our gifted kids. Okay. I'd like to just put my teacher hat back on for a wee minute and tell you a little bit about what we do at Mind Plus and why we do it. So Mind Plus is a specialist program for our gifted kids. It is a day a week where students either come to us in person, or they come to us online, or they come to us in their school. So we work with the school to deliver Mind Plus in a school. And we have a specialist program that's designed to target three big things about our gifted kids. It's designed to target their thinking and learning about big ideas, because we know that our gifted kids love to think and learn about big stuff, not just small stuff, but big stuff. We also target their social and emotional learning. So we help them understand themselves. We help them understand different is the norm and it's okay. We teach them those regulation strategies as well. And then the third part of what we do is specifically help kids to develop their own strengths. For our very little kids who come to Mind Plus, it's often just based on what they are really interested in and really passionate about. And as they get older through Mind Plus, we much more specifically help them target their specific strength and talent areas. If you're interested in Mind Plus for your child, check out our website. All the information is there for you. And I'd also tell you about what we do with teachers in schools, because it's really, really exciting. So we are supporting teachers in schools with free, fun, and easy resources to help them understand all brains are different. That's okay. How do we support our kids who are differently wired in our schools? Our very first professional learning package that we've created as part of this program is called Gifted 101. It's free for all teachers across the country. It's a really fun experience if you're a teacher and you want to know more about the gifted stuff in a fun and practical way. Look us up on our website and join up so that you can take part in Gifted 101. All right, I'm going to leave you with some of my top tips as a teacher and as a parent. Just really quickly in closing, be flexible. What works for all kids doesn't necessarily work for our differently wired kids. It is important to be flexible and find what works for them. And also, annoyingly, they grow and change all the time. So sometimes we need to be flexible around, okay, let's change this up. Be curious, take time to work out why your child is the way they are. Assume the best of them, find their strengths. Do remember, it takes a village. This is an old phrase, but it's so true. Use any and all support you can get around you and around your family and around your child to support them and support you. Also, any and all resources that you can get and tap into that will support your child and support you, get them, use them, try them. If something doesn't work, don't worry about it, move on. It's not going to be the end of the world, but make use of your village. Also, play the long game. When you're raising a kid, it's really, especially a gifted kid, it's easy to get trapped in, I want my child to do really well at school. I want them to get high marks. I want them to do a really great university program. It's easy to get stuck in what you want for your child right now, which is understandable. But do remember that what you are growing here is an adult, right? Your child might be small now, but they're going to be an adult. What kind of adult do you want them to be? Do you want them to be happy? And I think for most parents, that's the bottom line. So play the long game. Think about what's going to work for the big picture over time. If things are bad one day, it doesn't mean they're going to be bad the next day. Take the big picture view and enjoy it. Raising a differently wired kid is definitely an interesting experience. Take the time and enjoy it. So thank you again for spending some time with me today, talking through some of the things that we know work for our gifted kids. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you again. Bye-bye.